This video is sponsored by Beam. Can an entire city be haunted? Haunted as some houses are supposed to be haunted. Not just a single building in that city, or the corner of a single street, or a single basketball court in a single pocket park. The nestless basket jutting out at sunset like some obscure and bloody instrument of torture. Not just one area, but everything. The whole works. Can that be? Taken from It, 1986 by Stephen King. Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Paul, and this video we're breaking down It. This has been one of my most highly anticipated shows of the year, and if you've followed the channel for a while, then you know we talked about the rumours of the series back in 2020. Finally, the first episode is here, and we return to Derry to witness another nightmare. Whereas the Losers Club are always destined to survive, this ups the stakes by bringing in new characters. None of these kids are promised to make it to adults, which is something that It was of course heavily based around. So I feel like it ratchets up the tension, and yeah, first episode isn't taking any prisoners. Throughout this series we're going to learn more of the history of Derry and discover the backstory of the creepiest clown on earth. Now to me, It Chapter 1 was an instant classic, and I think it was the perfect adaptation. However, the follow-up failed to deliver in my opinion, and to be honest, I've always found the adult stuff a bit boring. That was especially true in the miniseries in the 90s, which we've done a breakdown of on the channel. In both though, I think they skipped over the cool sections of the book, including the interludes that broke up the story. These standalone chapters told us the history of the town, and apparently they're what these 3 planned seasons are going to be based around. Each one will be set in its own time period, with this being set during the 60s. They're really cool, and after It Chapter 2 wrapped, Mushy Eddie and Skarsgård wanted to work on bringing these to life. However, in between they wanted a quick break, and Bill went off to make the Eternals. Oh god, okay Eddie, what did Andy do? Oh, The Flash, oh no! So yeah, I'm glad they finally returned to this, because there was a time period where it didn't seem like it was going to happen. Right from the off though, it's clear they love the text, and the episodes fill with some amazing Easter eggs, nods to maturing, and a hint at where the season's gonna end.
Where? Cuba.
I've also just reread the book in preparation for our breakdown on the series, as well as those first 2 movies, so make sure you subscribe for our coverage every week. We're going to get into it all in just a bit, but firstly just a quick word from our sponsors who'll help you sleep after watching this nightmare fuel. Okay, so this video is sponsored by Beam. I've always been absolutely terrible at getting to sleep, and pretty much every night it takes me like 2 or 3 hours before I finally drift off. It can make sleeping a nightmare, but Beam turns it to a dream. Literally, Beam helps you fall asleep faster, stay asleep longer, and wake up refreshed. All you have to do is put at least 1 scoop of powder into a mug of hot water or milk and blend using your Beam frother. Sip 30 to 45 minutes before bedtime and it'll help you drift off and get a good night's sleep. Plus, there's only 15 to 20 calories per scoop depending on the flavour. Beam's vegan, non-GMO with no dairy, no gluten, and no added sugar. Tastes great too, and I've got the chocolate chip cookie flavour, the beautiful brownie batter flavour, and cinnamon cocoa flavour as well. Beam have teamed up with us to give viewers of this channel exclusive early access to the Black Friday sale with up to 50% off for a limited time. Click my link in the description and use the code HEAVYSPOILERS at checkout for this amazing discount. This is Beam's biggest sale of the year and the best deal I've ever shared, so make sure you don't miss out. It's a dream with Beam, so go check them out and get a good night's sleep. Thank you. Okay, so we open with the haunting chant of trouble, trouble, trouble. This is actually the same thing that the family say when Maddie's kidnapped. This combined with the projector also foreshadows the trouble at the cinema at the end. The cinema plays a big part in the book as well, and it's what the Losers Club see I Was a Teenage Werewolf at. This then manifests itself as a scare for Richie, who gets transfixed with fear by the movie. They also run into Bowers and his gang at this location, which leads to a fight and the Losers getting their first win against the bullies. Them standing up to him and his crew is them gaining strength and bravery, and it's an important stepping stone on the way to standing up to Pennywise. So this place is a very important location. At this point in the story, we see the Capitol Cinemas showing The Music Man, specifically the song You Got Trouble. This is a movie all about a con artist who fakes a moral panic to get the townsfolk to fund a marching band for their kids. This is mainly to keep them out of trouble, with that trouble being the kids play way too much pool. If only that was an issue today. Like, I'd rather teenagers be playing too much pool than a knife crime and writing comments on my Instagram saying Ryan Airy poops on heavy spoilers. Those kids got no respect. I also love how we get this line.
Watch for the telltale signs of corruption.
It's just what we and Maddie do after the scene as we notice something's up with the family. Now, though Pennywise often appears as creatures, he has appeared in human form when we look at the source material. Upon returning to Derry, Bev met Mrs. Kirsch, who was seemingly living in her old home. She slowly started to notice very strange things were going on before the monster was unleashed and she got some big old granny titties in her face, which isn't quite what happens with Maddie, but it does take on the form of people. The evil entity is of course the corrupter of humans, and kids are the ones that he targets. Just like the conman here tricks people in the movie. So it's an apt opening to the show. And yes, a side note, it also inspired one of the best Simpsons episodes ever, which is Marge versus the Monorail. The show in general though seems to be talking about the loss of innocence and how things fail to live up to ideals. Whether it's the kids being corrupted by indecency or the country going on a path to nuclear war, there's the feeling that everything's going bad, and that it isn't just the picture-perfect image that we're first presented with. This is something that we get in the opening, and the family thematically hammers that home. There's some naughty corruption in the audience as well, as we see a guy kissing a girl's neck and a woman looks on in disgust. We then meet the symbol of innocence in Maddie, who's so innocent he's sucking on a pacifier. He's also holding a crackerjack box and is clearly just an innocent kid. Now we learn the dummy's a coping mechanism, which is similar to Eddie's inhaler, even if the latter was actually just a placebo. In the car, it actually provides him some security, and this is because it provides comfort for the character. The pacifier itself also seems like it might be reminiscent of Georgie in his yellow raincoat, especially as Maddie and Georgie are the first victims in the movie and show. As we learn, Maddie snuck into the showing, and this is in order to find refuge. We see he has a black eye, and it's similar to Eddie Cochran and his brother from the book. Taking place in the summer of 1958, Eddie's brother died by seemingly falling from a ladder. His death was initially ruled as being accidental, but then Eddie ran away, which is when Pennywise got to him. The younger brother's body was then exhumed, and the medical examiner ruled that he was beaten with a hammer. Thus, his death and Eddie's disappearance were blamed on their father, and the police didn't investigate much after that. The idea of a child running away and being caught by Pennywise is also shown perfectly in Maddie, who flees into the night. This involves him running out into the fire, which is where we see a character we'll talk about later. You may also recognise this location as it was in It Chapter 2. In that movie, we got a flashback when Richie returned to Derry and saw it was where he would spend most of his time on the arcade machines. Sadly, it was shut down around 1998 and has been abandoned ever since. The fire looks very similar to that movie though, albeit a little shinier. The costume and set designers though have done a fantastic job throughout this episode, and yeah, it looks exactly like how I imagined it back then. We also see that it's around Christmas time and learn that Matty Clements regularly sneaks in. The projectionist Hank also hints that he has a bad home life, which does seem to explain his black eyes. If you've read the book, I'm sure you'll instantly recognise his name, as he's said to have been one of Pennywise's victims. In the book, his death happened in 1958, and Beverly heard his voice coming from the pipes, which is something they kind of play upon later. In the end, his body was discovered on a construction site, and after this, police put a strict curfew in effect. We also have Ronnie, which I think might be short for Veronica, and if that's the case, then this is Veronica Grogan. Ronnie helps him out by saying he went the opposite direction, and we see that he's hiding behind a standee for Geronimo. He was the legendary leader of the Apache, and this seems to be a statue for the 1962 movie about his life. It might even hint at the upcoming Native American part of the story, as in the book we learn the ritual of Chud was used by the early inhabitants of Derry. The Native Americans managed to banish him for 100 years at one point, but ultimately it always returned. Currently it gestates in a cycle of 27 years, so this brought humanity about 4 cycles of peace. In the movies, this was shown when Mike drugs Bill in It Chapter 2, and we might even get to see some of the rituals in the past. We will be seeing the same tribe appear later down the line, according to the PR for the show, but that might end up being something in Season 2. We also see a poster for Cape Fear. This is the original one, which was one of my favourites as a kid. It nicely plays into the themes of the show, as this summer Pennywise will unleash fear upon the Cape of Derry. This symbolically also plays into the poster for 1962 Spiral Road, which can be seen outside. It's a movie all about discovering one's religion and dealing with fear along a river, which fits in perfectly with the Barrens. Ronnie is also sucking on a red lollipop, which might visually play off the red balloons and the white strings that hang from them. Poor Matty is then chased out of the cinema, and then he decides to go anywhere but Derry. It's very similar to Ben's walk through the winter, which is something that comes directly from the book. He escaped seeing Pennywise as his dad on the Barrens, and then had a long walk home. He was ignored by people passing in cars, which also played into the car that ignored him when Bowers went to cut him on the bridge. This is something similar to what happens with Matty as he hitchhikes, and he's passed by a red truck. The colour red is also used here because I think you think that it's gonna be a Pennywise trap, only for the seemingly safe family to be the real terror in the opening. As he walks down the road, a train also passes overhead, and the book talks about how some of the tracks run past the Barrens. Vagrants would often disappear around this, with them seemingly being grabbed off the train. The train going just also nicely plays into the idea that Matty wants to basically leave the town. We also see the Derry sign complete with Paul Bunyan. We saw the statue in It Chapter 1 and 2 with its scaring Richie in the ladder. Later on, we see how the statue's coming soon in a newspaper article, and how the council presses forward with plans to build it. In the book, no one really wanted the tacky plastic statue, with even the art teacher threatening to blow it up. Now, though Derry's fictional, there is a real-life Paul Bunyan statue in Bangor, Maine. This was the inspiration for the city, and we get a nod to this with a Bangor Chew advert on the side of a building. Also on the sign is a badge for the Legion of White Decency, which was a northern version of the KKK. In the book, this was the group responsible for burning down the Black Spot, which was a nightclub run by black soldiers on the Derry Army Corps base, which may be something we see later on. This base looks like it's going to be integral to the show, and I do have a theory about what's in that secret building. Also think we met a character mentioned in the book who becomes a major player in one of King's other works. I'll talk about that more when we get to him, but yeah, they're clearly laying the groundwork for a lot of cool things. We then meet the family heading to Portland, Maine, who are kind enough to pick Matty up. Portland, Maine is also a nice little reference, as that's where Stephen King originally comes from. As we'll later learn as well, they are victims of Pennywise and also end up in the movie at the end of the episode. The family do seem nice at first though, but then you start to question, why would a family be willing to take a hitchhiking kid to another town? The son also has an army action figure, foreshadowing how important the airbase will be later on. Now on the radio, we also hear talk of the Soviets' underground atomic tests. These happened at the Semipalatinsk test site in Kazakhstan. Did I nail the pronunciation there? I can't even pronounce pronunciation, so I'm fucked on that. Beyond that though, I do wonder if the radio is referring to the Tsar bombs. This was tested in October 1961, but the timeline doesn't quite match up, mainly because the rest of the episode's in April, around 4 months later. So with this taking place in January, yeah, might not be that. The talk of nukes though is something that was a huge fear during the Cold War. This is the closest the world came to nuclear apocalypse, and it took place in 1962, which is the same year as the show. Fear was in the air, and it's possible that Pennywise was using this to his advantage. In 1959, Fidel Castro overthrew the communist government and installed a communist regime that was allied with the USSR. A red nation being so close to the USA was unacceptable, and thus JFK oversaw an attempted invasion and regime change. Almost everything went wrong though, and the US were exposed in the plot to help Cuban exiles retake their home. This led to Castro further cozying up to Russia and nukes being placed on the island to prevent invasion. It caused a political crisis which led the two nations to come within hours of nuclear shootouts. So yeah, not a good time to be in a town built around a creature that feeds on fear. The Cold War can also be described as a time of great division between nations. On top of that, the commanders of the Derry Air Force Base seem to welcome a war. In the book, we learn that Pennywise has somewhat an influence over the adults in the town, which means a lot of bad things happen. Adults look the other way when the kids are in trouble, and the police don't really investigate the disappearances too deeply. So he may even be corrupting those at the base to heighten their fear and paranoia. Beyond that, Hanlon on the base wants to finish what they started in the Korean War, and his superior clearly wants the same. If the Hanlon name sounds familiar, this is also because he's got a big connection to the Losers Club, which we'll talk about in more in just a bit. At the base, they discuss how they could easily fly those B-52 bombers into Russia and trigger the end of the world. It's why I think Pennywise in the show may even end up causing the Cuban Missile Crisis, which is such a wild thing to do, mate. Like, the guy went from scaring a kid in a drain to edging us towards nuclear annihilation. Yay! Entertainment Weekly also mentioned that Paulie's Cuban, so this could cause a rift at the base. Anyway, all the talk of war is depressing, so let's get back to a lighter topic with this lovely family ride. We get the son spelling out everything while the daughter dips her hand into a box of liver, and the former could be a nod to the stand spelt M-O-O-N. The liver is the first major sign that things aren't as they seem though, as the bloody hands are put in Maddie's face and the young girl shouts at her brother. The mother then calls her daughter a little harlot as they return to Derry. The mother also looks super pale as she starts asking the son to spell creepy words. The low angle of some of the shots and the cheerful chanting is absolutely horrifying, and the kid's eyes being off is of course a Pennywise thing, so yeah, it starts to give you a bit of a clue. These eyes being off is something actually that Bill Skarsgård did in real life, and apparently he did it during the audition, and they gave him the part. The woman's baby then starts to be born, which is absolute nightmare fuel. She gives birth to a weird mutant baby with wings, and what's even more disturbing is that it seems to have absorbed the real baby, as we can see the mutant has a baby's head on its shoulder. We also have the umbilical cord still attached, which is such a messed up image. As always, you have to wonder what's real and what's not though, as birth defects were brought up on the radio earlier. So is this a manifestation of the young girl and mother's fears, or did it influence Maddie's perception? I've talked a lot to people about the series who've seen it, and we've kind of gone back and forth over what was what. Some people thought this was its own sort of creature, which is why it keeps appearing. However, there's a big conversation in the source material and all the adaptations where the Losers Club talk about how everything is it. All the scares they've had saw it taking different forms, but at the end of the day, it's all the same creature. To me, this is Pennywise beginning a new cycle, and it appears as a baby because it's being born again. Apparently the show will delve into the origins of Pennywise and show how it came to take the name Bob Gray. So this might be Pennywise emerging from his slumber after 27 years to feed, or even nursing himself back to health after the Native Americans sealed him in. Maddie then tries to pretend it's not happening, which is one way to stop Pennywise, I suppose. You see, Pennywise gains powers through fear, and thus if you can mentally withstand it, then it can't consume you. But yeah, it would be a bit difficult to remain calm when a woman's giving birth and bursting out a baby. I think it weaponized this version of an idealistic family because it's something Maddie wants deep down. Having been abused at home, he would seek a loving family like this, but this twisted version then completely destroys him. It's bone-chilling when the kids and the baby stare at him, and poor Maddie's taken. His dummy then flies out the window and right down into the sewer lair, just like Georgie's boat when he was grabbed by the creature. We then head into the sewers and get the It title above the water. This is similar to how it appears in the first movie, and it's accompanied by the sound effects from It Chapter 2. The sewers is where Pennywise operates from, and this is where Patrick Hockstetter was grabbed at in the first movie. It's also near where Adrian Mellon was murdered during the opening of the second film. We never actually see what happens with Maddie, and it's very similar to Georgie's death in the opening of part 1. I do wonder if Pennywise might even appear as Maddie at some point, just like how it appeared as Georgie. In the main story, Bill was obsessed with trying to find his brother, and throughout this episode, we see the kids try and fail to find Maddie. Cutting to 4 months later, we meet one of the temporary Losers Club members who feels like a stand-in for Richie. Guy's a bit over the top and annoying and a jokester, which is just like what Richie was like. We catch him plane watching, just like how Stan Uris would birdwatch in the book. Now, we see he and his friends have made their base at the Derry Standpipe. This was the site of horrible deaths in the book, and it made a cameo during It Chapter 1. This pipe is actually in Bangor, Maine, where King wrote parts of the book, and the real-life one was used in It Chapter 1. As we see later, you can have an amazing view of Derry from the viewing deck, and symbolically, I feel like it's a location that ties into the story. Pennywise, of course, roams around in the sewers under the city, so it's a nice juxtaposition to have the heroes operate on high, looking over everything. In the book, people would have picnics up on the viewing deck, and one night, some kids found their way in. However, they ended up falling into the water reserves after getting lost. It was also the first place that Stanley Uris encountered Pennywise, and he was only able to make it out alive by repeating the names of birds. We catch the kid noting down everything flying into the base and learn he's obsessed with space. And I'm not a rapper. We even see a space-themed watch as he checks the time. This is Tom Corbett's Space Cadet, which is a character that spanned TV, radio and comics, the latter of which we do see on a desk at one point. We then cut to Leroy Hanlon arriving at the Derry Air Force Base aboard a C-130. With him is his co-pilot Paulie Russo, played by Rudy Mancuso. If you recognise him, well, that's because he's worked with Muschietti before, and he played Albert Desmond in the Flash movie. Actually, you might not recognise him, as no one saw that film. Leroy is, of course, Mike's grandfather, though, who's a big part of the Losers Club. This does change things slightly from the books, though, as that was actually Mike's father at the Air Force Base. However, the time's different. It happened in the 80s instead of the 50s, and we did see that Mike's parents died in a fire in the movies. So we just have Leroy present in this part of the story instead. And he's the one on the Air Force Base. Some minor changes. Now in the book, Mike lived on the farm with his dad, and they were subjected to constant racist attacks by the Bowers. They burned down the chicken house, and there was also the deadly fire at the Black Spot. The foreshadowing them making this club could actually be alluded to by Paulie when they step off the plane. He says, "I bet there's no good nightclubs or a decent Chinese restaurant." The Chinese restaurant is a major part of the book when the Losers Club return as adults. Named the Jade of the Orient, we do see an early version of this later in the episode. As for the Black Spot, I think this line is setting up them making that. In the book, due to black soldiers not being allowed to drink in the NCO club, or even with the white soldiers, they then ended up starting their own club at the base. The Legion of White Decency weren't happy with them drinking at the bars in town, so Major Fuller gave them this as a refuge. Fuller actually features in the show, and he's the one who we meet when the guys step off the plane. Now, as we learn, the pair are veterans of the Korean War, which is a neat connection to the 1990s miniseries. In the adaptation, Ben's dad was a fighter pilot in the war, but he was unfortunately killed in action. During the 1990s miniseries, we saw a vision of his ghost, and he wore a similar uniform to what the soldiers have on here. Which, yeah, I'm sure is standard, but it's just a nice nod to it. Getting into a jeep, they're then driven by a guy who's mean-mugging them for a lot of the scenes. Seems like he knows something, almost like he's psychically aware of something, mate. Now, the wiki has confirmed that this is none other than Dick Halloran. Yep, that Dick from The Shining. He was the man who told Danny about his powers and helped him escape the Overlook Hotel. Now in the movie, the character got murdered, whereas in the book, he escaped with Wendy and Danny. But yeah, massive character from King's work, and it's nice that they're expanding his mention in it. There he was brought up when they were talking about the founding of the Black Spot, which will likely be something that we see later in the season. He's always been one of my favourite Stephen King characters though, and he's also amazing in Doctor Sleep. So it's great to see him here, and it's probably my favourite part of the episode. Played by Chris Chalk, you might also recognise the actor from the Gotham TV show. As we know, the character has the shine, and he appears to listen to people's thoughts on a few occasions. We will see other references to King's works as well, as the trailer shows the Shawshank prison bus. Shawshank was mentioned in the book, and it of course featured in King's novella Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption, which was later adapted into, drumroll please, the Shawshank Redemption. The cast has also mentioned in interviews that the show will connect to the Dark Tower. Considering that Mature the Turtle is heavily involved in that series, it does make a lot of sense that they'd connected to the greater King universe. But hopefully, it'll not be connected in any way to that awful 2017 movie. Driving through the base, they then go past special projects. This is a top secret restricted area, which usually screams aliens, especially with shows set in the 50s and 60s like this. Roswell has remained a major talking point for decades, and yeah, the show obviously involves interdimensional aliens. So, hear me out on this one. My theory is that it's either housing Pennywise's crash site or Mature the Space Turtle. In case you don't know, Mature the Turtle created our universe after vomiting it out, which is this actually happened. Maturin resides in what's known as the Macroverse, and it's an opposite to Pennywise. Psychically, it empowered the Losers Club and helped them to defeat the creature. Now, might not be that, and like I said, it's also possible that this is where Pennywise crashed on Earth. As Mike told us in It Chapter 2, it came from another dimension and landed on the planet. We even saw this meteor coming down in the vision. From here, it established its home, and then mankind came to the area. Eventually, when settlers arrived, they built up the town around it, and it had a constant supply of food. The book says it is Derry just as much as Derry is it, and in its death, a major part of the town collapses. So it does make sense that the base built something up around this strange locale. Being a force of sheer evil also made it start a major beef with the turtle, who then aided everyone who stood against it. So I think that somehow the US Air Force managed to locate the crash site, and they built the Derry Air Force Base around it, possibly wanting to use whatever it is as a weapon against those filthy commie bastards. Gosh darn it. Dick also gives an ominous look, which shows that whatever's in there is bad news. And though it could be housing a nuke, I think it's going far beyond that. We then learn that Hanlon's living on the base until his family arrive, and that they're setting up a home in Derry. He wants a taste of normality, which is something that is definitely not going to happen in this creepy town. Cutting to Derry itself, we can also see the standpipe in the distance. We got a good look at this street in It Chapter 1, and this was where Mike rode down the road. We then see Derry High School with a sign that says, Bert the Turtle says duck and cover. It's a reference to all the PSAs that basically told you what to do in case of a nuclear strike. which would it have helped that much? I don't know. The turtle is of course also a reference to Maturin, and there was a couple of turtles sprinkled throughout Muschetti's films. Later on, we see someone dressed up as the character, and a turtle also appears when Matty gets one as a prize in his Cracker Jack box. He even says that turtles are lucky, so I like to think that this is Maturin hiding in plain sight to help defeat his rival. This is a sign warning them to keep safe, and yeah, it just ties into the good nature of the turtle. Signs like this in general helping the kids have also appeared throughout It, and one was left by the Derry police force in It Chapter 1, I want to say. There it was reminding kids of the curfew and that they had to be home by 7 PM. So yeah, it's just that constant oppression on the kids and being like, look, there's danger around every corner. Stay safe, kids. Which I'm sure is a lovely environment to grow up in. To mature in, you could say. Nah, shit joke that, and I apologise. Dreamer by Joyce Harrison plays as we see the school in the 60s and meet one of our main characters. The students are staring at her, and a jar of pickles has been left in her locker as a trap. It completely embarrasses her, everyone laughs, but it's actually a really harsh joke when we learn why there's a load of pickles in there. Turns out her father worked in a factory and ended up falling into one of the machines after she left one of her toys in there. She feels guilt about the whole thing, and I can imagine that Pennywise might have had something to do with this accident. My guess is it'll also take on the form of Pickle Rick at some point and chase her through the school. Nah, but I can imagine we'll see some more stuff involving pickles. We then learn that her friend's planning a beach getaway with the Ginchiest parties, which apparently means coolest. She wants to be part of the cool kids club, whereas the main ones are resigned to the losers. We see them later on, and this leaves poor old Lily isolated, which is why she finds some kinship in Matty, albeit in secret. One of the boys even calls her Loony Lily. This reminded me of Luna Lovegood from Harry Potter, but it might be a reach there. Now we hear that the plane spotter thinks that the Martians have been interested in Earth since the dawn of the atomic age, and I'm telling you mate, the secret base is hiding aliens. He even brings this up and theorizes there's one on ice at the airport base, and we basically need to theory time the whole thing. It's here that we then learn that his mate's called Teddy Uris, who is a relative of Stanley. There's graffiti on his locker that reads, Teddy Urine sucks balls. Stan was also called that in the book, and the character was also Jewish. This is something that plays into Teddy's story later on, and we meet Stan's father and his brother Don. This is confirmed by the credits, and it's possible that he may have even forgotten about his brother's death. In the book, Bill talks to his wife Audra and brings up how he never actually told her that Georgie was murdered. Initially, he wondered if this was just to avoid the awkward conversation, but later realizes that he simply forgot about him. Sure, he knew he had a brother, but he couldn't really remember exactly what happened to him. It was only after Mike's call to ask him to return that he started to think about what really went down. His mate says how World War III is imminent, and this further plays on the theme of the inevitable nuclear war, which is a fear that will only escalate as 1962 carries on. Cutting back to the base, we then see what might be Hanlon's B-52 being painted. We see some nose art, which is your classic pin-up girl. Bombers had these during World War II and the Korean War, and they've since become iconic symbols of the era. The most famous of these might be the Memphis Belle, which is the first bomber to fly 25 combat missions over Europe. I believe that they were also on the Enola Gay, which was the B-29 that dropped the atomic bomb. The painting is of a woman wearing what looks like a cartoon devil's cape, and it possibly hints at the evil that's corrupting Derry. It's here that we also get our first insight into the racism of the era. Airman Masters won't salute Hanlon, and is later assigned to latrine duty due to not respecting the rank of the major. Now this might be a reach, so brace yourself for some stretching, but I did wonder if the name Masters was to play into the racial connotations. Originally the surname Masters came about because it meant someone who was a master of their trade, like a schoolmaster and so forth. However, when slavery became commonplace, it became a surname that was often given to the heads of plantations. So yeah, it might not be that, but I think it's worth at least discussing since the guy's a racist and he's called Masters. General Shaw's having none of it though, and the Major and General plan to meet later on. He's played by James Remar, who I'm sure a lot of you will recognise. Warriors, come out and play with the jangly the bottles thing. We then get another ominous look from Dick Halloran. Now, we know Leroy doesn't die as he's in It Chapter 1, but I do wonder if a lot of bad things are going to happen. In Teddy's room, we then see his mate trying to catch a look at his neighbour's boobs, and he wonders why women wear those pointy bras. Same mate, like I've wondered why women look like PS1 Lara Croft ever since watching Psycho as a kid, which break down on the channel now. Yeah, which has never looked good to me, but I tell you what mate, you will look good if you check out our merch store right below the video. There we have lots of different nerdy tops, including our Pennywise one, which is inspired by the show. There's lots of different designs on there, including stuff for Gen V and lots of horror classics, including our new Texas Chainsaw Massacre one. The more you buy, the more of a discount you get, and it all goes towards helping videos like this get made. Either way, he's a peeping Tom, which gave me a lot of Back to the Future vibes. Hanging up above the bed, they also have what I believe is a B-52 and also a flying saucer, potentially giving us more hints about the base. We even see a poster for the movie Earth versus the Flying Saucers, and as he's talking to himself, we can see a poster from the creature from the Black Lagoon. This is actually a direct reference to the book, and there Pennywise turned into the creature to scare Eddie. On the desk is the Space Cadet comic we mentioned earlier, as well as a Fokker DR-1 triplane toy, which is the same plane that the famous Red Baron used. In general, the room, it just fits in nicely with the Losers Club in the future, as both are a bunch of nerds. Teddy is also studying while the Chatterbox is drawing a comic instead of doing his work, which did remind me heavily of Bill. He of course loved writing stories and eventually became an author. Now in the comic we have an alien fighting a soldier in the woods, which could be foreshadowing something that happens in the season. The alien has a giant bulbous head, very similar to Pennywise. We also have a kid in their bike being beamed up into a spaceship, and as we know, a lot of kids are going missing around the woods, and this might be his theory about what's going on there. Which, to be fair, isn't too far from the truth, mate. He then rattles off about all the stuff that's weird in the town, but I love how it's like,
Oh no! Anyway.
When Teddy brings up Maddie's death, he also says he's just a runaway, which is similar to Bill wanting to find Georgie. We learn how they were bribed to go to his birthday party and weren't really his friends, which does kind of make his death even sadder. Behind them is also a white tree, and though this might be a stretch, it resembles the White Tree of Gondor. Mike even mentions the Lord of the Rings in the book, but yeah, could be a reach. We then see Lily in the bathroom in a scene that's a callback to Bed's bathroom bloodfest. She's looking upset in the mirror, but we see her with a tortured smile when the camera moves to her reflection. Her home life sucks, and we see the turtle that Maddie gave her on her wrist. As mentioned earlier, this is another nod to Maturin, and it's something that's shown in the upcoming flashback. He takes her to the standpipe viewing deck, which acts as a sanctuary. In the book, the Losers Club had something similar, and they built a hideout at the Barrens. I do feel like this location is going to pop up constantly throughout the series and will basically be where they go to hide away from things. And it also leads directly into the sewers, so it's a nice way to be like, let's be brave and go down there and go fight the clown. Now while Maddie always got the turtle, Lily always gets a rocket ship, which possibly hints at how it arrived on Earth from the Macroverse. They trade their little trinkets and say turtles are lucky, which might be why she survives the cinema massacre at the end. Now as mentioned earlier, she tells the story of how her dad died in the jarring factory, which was pretty jarring. It's very reminiscent of the horrors of Derry's history, including the Kitchener Ironworks. We even hear the noise of the machines as she tells a story, which adds to the horror of the tragic tale. Now I know it's emotional, yeah, but when watching it, I did think it was a bit Gremlins-y, like the story where the dad was burned alive climbing down the fire dressed as Santa, which was even later parodied in Gremlins 2.
I don't know, one of the machines jammed up.
I was 6 or 7, and I remember I had the day off from school, and Mom had let me go to the park. She'd made me a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. I was going through that peanut butter and jelly sandwich phase, and this man with this beard and a hat looked just like Abe Lincoln.
Honey, I really don't think we've
Except
got
for the
time for this
raincoat.
now, you know?
I remember, oh God.
When the foreman realized it was a whole other station, it was too late.
We then see that it's New Year's as the fireworks hit, and she's starting to realise she's nothing like the mean girls of Derry High. The music here is also very much like Twin Peaks. This is a show that was a huge inspiration for the 1990s miniseries, and 2 involved disappearances, murders and the supernatural. Maddie then goes to kiss her, only to get hit with the friend zone card. Oof! My guy cannot catch a break. Old dummy breath, yeah? No girls are gonna kiss him. Your breath smells like dummies. The flashback then ends as Lily's mum comes in and reminds her that they're going to the cemetery the next day. She's not visited her dad's grave as of yet and clearly isn't ready. She also clearly feels guilt over the fact he died trying to save her toy. Basically, it just carries on the theme of adults kind of disregarding children, which is a big part of the book. She's similar to Bev in that she's an outcast and bullied by the other children. This is cemented in the next sequence where she hears Matty in the drain. In the book, after several kids went missing, people swore they could hear them down the sink. There was a woman in the book who was even washing the dishes and swore she heard voices echoing in the pipes. No one believed her, but we did see Bev in the bathroom hearing the same thing. The choking voice spoke rapidly now, and as as it spoke, it changed. Now it was the young voice of the child that she had first heard. Now it was the teenage girl's voice. Now, horribly, it became the voice of a girl Beverly had known, Veronica Grogan. But Veronica was dead. She'd been found dead in a sewer drain. I'm Matthew. I'm Betty. I'm Veronica. We're down here with the clown and the creature and the mummy and the werewolf and you, Beverly. We're down here with you, and we float, we change. A gout of blood suddenly belched from the drain, splattering the sink and the mirror and the wallpaper with its frog and lily pad pattern. Both Bev and Lily were coveting something given to them by a guy who fancied them when they heard the noise down the drain. So it's a very similar scene. We can also hear the song about trouble from the movie, which hints that he's somehow trapped in the cinema. He's even able to reach his finger into the bath, which mirrors the sink full of blood in chapter 1. Lily, of course, kept her standpipe non-date a secret from her friend, and we hear her tell the girl about what happened in the bath. They then rush into the bathroom as her mate doesn't want the cool girls to hear what Lily's saying, especially as the kids already call her Loony Lily. We then get an Easter egg on the bathroom stall door with Alvin Marsh written in a heart. Alvin is of course Bev's dad, which further hammers home the Lily and Bev similarities. In the book, he ended up working as a janitor at the school and
I'm getting the word nonce.
Sadly, it's really hard to make out the rest of the graffiti, but we might see Bev's dad in a future episode. She ran here on the last day of school and was tormented by the kids. It's also where she saw herself at when confronting Pennywise in the final fight of It Chapter 2. Her mate is more worried about her social standing though, but they're interrupted when a girl rips arse.
It wasn't me.
Well, it was fucking one of yous. Disgusting!
This poor actress is just listed as Fart Girl, which did make me laugh as I'm very immature. I do wonder if like she's going to become a massive actress like 20 years from now and they'll look back on chat shows and be like, you were known as Fart Girl. She's like, yeah, I was known as Fart Girl. And then she'll fart, which will be great. Now, we then cut to the lads wondering about why men have nipples. It all goes back to the alien theory as well as they find Lily at the standpipe. It's here that she reveals that Matty actually took her here. The poor lad actually overemphasized his friendship with the two guys, and it turns out he only ever got brought to the viewing deck once. She has guilt over her father's death though, and these guys have guilt over Matty's disappearance. So they nicely reflect each other. The discussion about him coming up the pipes sounds mental though. It does sound mental to be fair, as you'd need to know exactly where the pipes are, like the back of his hand. Even the alien threat's more believable to them, which I'm telling you, it's aliens, but they then decide to investigate it anyway. Cutting to the Derry Air Force Base, we then see it's part of Strategic Air Command. They were responsible for operating the nuclear deterrent against the Soviet Union during most of the Cold War, which is why they have B-52s stationed there. The General and Hanlon share a drink in his office as they discuss his service in the Korean War, particularly his bravery flying through Megali. Hanlon is there to test the new B-52 and we hear how he was raised on a farm. This is something Buck might experience and it's likely why he naturally went to work in a slaughterhouse at the opening of Chapter 1. Mike wanted to be a pilot as well and basically he wanted to fly ever since he went up in the air with a guy who dusted crops for his dad. Now in the book, his dad became a farmer after being medically discharged from the military. The farm became a major part of the origin of Henry's beef with Mike. Mr. Bowers was a massive racist and burned the Hanlons' chicken coop. The police then sided with the Hanlons and Butch Bowers had to pay restitution. He despised the family after that and then passed his hatred on to Henry. We also learn about how the general's father was a soldier from the Indian Wars to the Philippines. Following in his dad's footsteps, he signed up to be a doughboy, which is a nickname for American soldiers in World War I. Now Leroy says he wants to fix what's wrong with their country. One of the biggest issues at the time was racism, and it was only 2 years before the landmark Civil Rights Act was signed. However, they also had to fight against communism, the nukes, birth of Ryan Airy, and a lot of bad things were happening. Communism seems like it's the main threat to shore, and we then cut to Teddy's home life. They're devout Jews, and it appears that they're having Shabbat dinner, complete with matzah balls and challah bread, which I hope I've pronounced right. Teddy doesn't seem to be into his family's traditions though, and it's kind of like how Stanley didn't want to be pigeonholed by religion. Now he asks his dad if it's possible that someone could keep a kid in the sewers and torture them. His father's offended by the silly question, but I was like, I don't know mate, I don't think it's that crazy of a question. He says to stop living in fantasy and that his family escaped Buchenwald. It was the notorious concentration camp where prisoners' skins and body parts were used to make lampshades and all sorts of other grim things. Ilse Koch was one of the women accused of the horrible crimes in the camp and was said to have inspired the murderer Ed Gein. This is something the recent Monster series has recently explored, with the skin lamps being attributed to her. His dad's furious that he seems to be lacking in his bar mitzvah prep and that he's instead studying a Flash comic. I definitely think this is chosen because, you know, Andy Muschietti was the director of The Flash, and this is the iconic issue 123. This featured The Flash of Two Worlds, which was a legendary story that basically had Barry Allen disappear into the world of the original Flash Jay Garrick. It works here as the eldritch horror of it delves into multiple realities, and we also have heroes from two generations sort of intersecting in the same show, in the same universe. We then see Teddy read a Batman comic after this, specifically Detective Comics 298. This is the first appearance of Clayface, and again it fits in the theme of an enemy that can transform into anything. Batman also featured heavily in The Flash, and Muschietti is signed on to do The Brave and the Bold, so it might be him giving himself a pat on the back. These are of course both DC Comics as well, which is a company owned by Warner Brothers, who are the studio who also produced the It movies and this show. Pennywise then strikes at Teddy and his lamp turns into one of the aforementioned skin lamps as it ties into the familial trauma. It fits with what happened to Matty, as the fear of birth defects was mentioned on the radio. And then suddenly, a mutant baby was born. Lily's guilt also manifested in hearing Matty, and now Teddy's seeing the lamp that his father told him about. Like the Losers Club in the movie, they've all had their own experience of things they can't explain. We then get another look at Derry and can see the Jade of the Orient restaurant. It's in a totally different location to It Chapter 2 and the book, so obviously they changed the location and moved out the center of Derry. They moved to a new location. Make sure you update the TripAdvisor. If you squint, you can also see Keen's Pharmacy at the back, which was a location in both the movies and book. There, Mr. Keen was basically involved in one of the interludes, which centered around Prohibition-era gangsters, and the town basically going into vigilante justice to try and get them. Led to a big shootout, and the battle even had a mural which could be seen in It Chapter 1. So it's clear that Andy has always had an interest in showing the history of Derry. Opposite the Chinese restaurant is Nan's Luncheonette, which is also a location mentioned in the book. There's also matching sporting goods, and I love this attention to detail on the set dressing. This proto-Losers Club then meet after discussing the lampshade, again similar to the Losers Club. Now it turns out that Lily was actually a patient at Juniper Hill. This is the asylum where Henry Bowers was locked up at after he was arrested, and it's where Pennywise helped him escape from. I do wonder if she'll unfortunately end up back there, as it doesn't look good that all her friends died and she's the only survivor. And she's saying a flying baby did it.
It was the butterfly, I tell you. The butterfly!
All the kids' deaths were pinned on Bowers in the book and movie, and Lily might even take the fall for the crimes of Pennywise. The kids then decide to work together and head to the library, which of course features in the book and movies. The inside looks more like the miniseries though, as opposed to It Chapter 1 and 2. However, I do love that they have the little sister that they have to bring along, and she even fell for the task of finding a non-existent book. Reading the article, we can see a person anonymously reported that Matty was hitchhiking, and this might have been the last person to see him. It's possible that this was the guy in the red truck and he just felt embarrassed about passing him. We also see that US steel prices are rising, which was something that actually happened before being stopped by JFK. Now this is the Derry Herald, which is the same paper that Ben looked at in It Chapter 1. Now like Eddie Cochran, the police thought Matty was killed by his father, who was known to abuse him. However, the kid said to talk to the girl from the theatre, who's also mentioned in the paper. She says that the police tried to pin the crimes on her father, which was most likely due to racism. Overhearing them mention the song in the sewers, we then learn the girl also heard something similar. We then cut to Leroy, who's reading the paper. The Paul Bunyan statue is the lead story, as mentioned earlier, and it also mentions the US aiming to head to the moon. Along with this is also NATO trying to pressure the Russians. This might be to do with Kennedy trying to get the Russians to stop underground nuclear test sites, as well as the US sending money to the UN, which also happened in real life. Leroy is on the base as well, as we see a picture of him with his wife and son. Based on the trailers, all three of them are going to play a major role in the rest of the season. He then gets attacked by what appears to be Russian spies. They're wearing altitude masks and flight suits to conceal their identities and want to know all the specs of the B-52. They're also very reminiscent of spacemen, but could also be people like the Masters guy from earlier. And basically, they're trying to scare him off base, which I do feel is more likely, mainly due to their American American accents.
The specs now.
Does play into the idea of fear though, and I did consider at one point that it might actually be Pennywise. However, Russo joins in to fight them off, so yeah, I think it's very unlikely. It also seems there's a fire in the hallway, so this could indeed be the guys who will burn down the black spot. We also get a shot where the gun's in Hanlon's face, which I feel is a little visual nod to Seven. Just always love that shot, and it's one of the most famous in the movie, and I'm like a proper cinephile, mate, because I noticed stuff like that. Speaking of cinephiles, we then cut to the kids going to the cinema to watch the movie Maddie saw before going missing. We can see The Devil at 4 O'Clock was playing, which is a disaster movie that featured a volcano erupting. We also see The Wild Westerners and Don't Knock the Twist playing. The latter featured the legendary twist dance, which was part of the moral panic of the 60s and 50s. This is actually a nice companion to the Music Man film, which was of course about manufactured moral panic. The cinema appears abandoned and has probably been closed for the last 4 months, especially with the police, trying to pin the murder on the staff that worked here. The kids then sit down to watch the movie and their emotions finally get the best of them. Teddy's crying and Lily expresses her guilt for abandoning Maddie. Once the movie starts, we then see that the loudmouth has been crying despite denying it. We then get a massive reveal that Maddie's in the movie along with the family from the start. This is akin to when the TV told Henry to kill his father, and there was a split-second shot where you could see Betty Ripson sitting below Pennywise. It's also reminiscent of The Shining, where Jack Torrance ended up in the New Year's Eve party photo. Somehow he's ended up in the movie, with this scene being just like the scene with the slides in It Chapter 1. That was actually brand new for the film, with Pennywise coming at the projector screen being based around that. In the book there was a photo album that he kind of came out of, but yeah, I think it was actually better in the movie where it was slides on a projector. I love this scene though, and the rest of the movie cast goes dark around Maddie. He talks to them directly and blames them for his situation, just like how Georgie blamed Bill for his death. "You lied and I died," I think he screamed. Each of the kids failed him though, and they're about to get a punishment. The mutant baby cries, and Matty develops a sinister side. It's unleashed on the kids, and the movie starts to burn. They also shout that the Air Force produced a mutant baby, which might be true if I'm right about those aliens. Yes, I will be bringing that up a lot. This scene is absolutely horrifying though, and we get some gruesome and brutal deaths. Now I consider this episode somewhat of a prologue, and the two survivors will then investigate their deaths. If Lily doesn't end up in Juniper Hill, that is. Like I've mentioned throughout the video, the book's filled with interludes. They tend to be where most of the people die, and I did kind of think that this episode was basically one of them. What it also tells you as well is that no one is safe. One of my main issues with the main movies is that the Losers Club always just had very close run-ins and then managed to get away. So when it kept happening with like 7 different characters, you're like, is Pennywise as scary as people think he is? Because I see a lot of kids just managing to get away from him. It was totally different when reading the book, as we had several kids getting murdered there, and we even saw some of their deaths from their perspectives. For the movie though, it was kept mainly to the Losers Club, so you didn't really get the threat that Pennywise truly was. So just having the characters like introduced and then being killed off this early on lets you know they're not messing around. I always respect it when they kill kids in a show, because I know it's a nightmare to get past the board and all the people looking over the scripts and being like, you sure? Are we going to kill kids? And doing it in the opening, doing this many kids, this gory, I respect that. That's something I can respect.
I salute you.
We also see Susie's arms chopped off, just like poor old Georgie. Lily's the only survivor of the horrific event, which is only going to make her survivor's guilt worse. People might end up thinking she's crazy, and like I've said, that she was potentially behind their deaths. I did even wonder if this was all just a vision, but yeah, them kids be dead, mate. Just closing out with her looking like Carrie and the arm still attached to her hand. I think that tops off a pretty great pilot episode. It's nice actually seeing stuff around the period that the book was initially set in as well, and this was something that was missing from chapters 1 and 2. They took place in 1988 and 2016, as opposed to the 1950s and 80s, which was what happened in the book. That's because, they wanted to set the sequel of chapter 2 around the era of release without making the Losers Club look too old. It also just helped to cash in on the 80s nostalgia, which was a big thing at the time due to the Stranger Things hype. However, I love going back to this time period set in this universe instead of like the 1990s miniseries, and the show apparently will go back 27 years each season, should this one prove to be a hit. King's works are ripe for an anthology show though, akin to American Horror Story, and there's so much backstory to explore. I mean, the book itself's absolutely massive, mate. Look at the size of that. It's obviously never been adapted in its entirety, but I'm hoping that this season can fill in a lot of the history within it. I love the dangling mysteries as well, with stuff like the Air Force Base, and I'm saying it now, aliens. Overall though, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so make sure you drop them below. If you want to follow us on Instagram and keep up to date with what we're doing, then make sure you check us out at Heavy Spoilers. Did you know as well that members of the channel also get early access to videos, and if you click the join button you'll get at least one breakdown a week before anyone else. All goes towards helping videos like this get made and costs just 99 cents a month, so yeah, thank you if you do that. It really means a lot to me, but a thanks in the comments and a thumbs up is enough. Either way, if you want something else to watch, we've got our breakdown of the ending of Gen V on screen right now. That is such a great video if I say so myself, and yeah, go check that out if you enjoyed the season. If you don't want to check it out, mate, what the hell's wrong with you? I'll see you next week. You make sure you have a good one. That's your homework this week. Have a good week and take care. Peace.